Well, my dear, it's a great joy to all of us that you've consented to come so soon after your visit to Regensburg at the International Folk Music Council to come and talk to us about Morris dancing as you knew it in the very early days, and about which you have something very special to say, because I suppose you're really the only real link now with the great days of Cecil Sharp's early discoveries. And it's a great joy and pleasure to have you with us today, and we're deeply grateful to you. Now, I want to ask you certain questions, as you know, and I know you're going to give me some very splendid answers. So we'll begin with the first question, and that is that I would be grateful if you'll say something at the outset about Cecil Sharp's discovery of the Morris dance and his views about the music.
Well, thank you, Kenneth. As you say, I suppose I am one of the very few people living who was associated with the Morris dance revival almost from the beginning, so I am able to review its development. You are, of course, acquainted with the almost miraculous circumstance of Cecil Sharp's first encounter with the Morris dance at Headington on Boxing Day, 1899.
Yes, indeed.
And of how that incident came as a revelation to him and led to his discoveries of the glories of English folk music, song, as well as dance.
Yes.
You know, I think we are so fortunate that Cecil Sharp did not regard folk music merely as an interesting relic of the past, as so many of his contemporaries did.
Yes.
He realized immediately that it was the expression of a deep-seated emotion, and that it was as significant to us in the present day as it had been in the past. For, as William Kimber said, our Morris is now what it was and what it always will be.
William Kimber always said very wise words, as you well know, and as I certainly know, having had the pleasure of his friendship over a good many years. Well, now I'd like you to say to us, tell us what happened after Cecil Sharp had noted the tunes from William Kimber on that Boxing Day in 1899. I believe he didn't, in fact, note the actual dances, and the song collecting really displaced them, did it not?
Well, yes, that's true. In that encounter at Headington, he noted the tunes from William Kimber, but, strange as it now seems, he did not note the dance movements until some years later.
No.
You see, he was primarily a musician.
Yes.
And probably he was puzzled to know how to tackle the dances.
Yes, yes.
And how to set about introducing them to a wider public.
Yes.
And so, at first, he concentrated on the songs.
Yes.
Then, towards the end of 1905, he was delighted when Miss Mary Neal, on his advice, got William Kimber to teach the dances to the members of her Working Girls Club.
That was the Esperance Club, wasn't it?
The Esperance Club,
That's right.
Then Cecil Sharp started to note the dances, at first in cooperation with Herbert McElwain,
yes,
the music director of the club. But actually, he took no active part in the teaching of the dances. He hoped that that would be undertaken by others who might be better qualified to do so.
Indeed.
However, he soon discovered that the dances were being used, just as a means of letting off high spirits.
Yes.
And their serious and artistic significance was being lost sight of.
Yes.
And also the characteristic movements of the dance were being distorted.
Yes. Well, now, but I'd be grateful if you will now tell us something of the reasons which led Cecil Sharp to take control of the Morris dance movement himself.
Well, he came to the conclusion that if ever the dances were to be passed on in their true traditional forms,
Yes.
he must have direct control over those who were teaching them.
Yes.
And so, in September 1909, a school of Morris dancing was founded at the physical training department of the Chelsea Polytechnic, with Cecil Sharp himself as director.
Yes.
The classes were open to the general public, and my sister Helen, who you know afterwards married Douglas Kennedy,
Yes.
and I attended them.
Yes. Yes, I remember those Christmas schools we used to hold at Chelsea Polytechnic. Those were great days. They've gone now, unfortunately. And now, I'd like you to say something, if you will, about the effect these dances had on you and your sister Helen.
But I still remember vividly, as though it were only yesterday, the thrill I had when I did the very first Morris step. It was like being transported to another world, and from that moment I knew that my course was set, and I devoted more or less the rest of my life to folk music.
Yes, indeed you did, with great success.
And Cecil Sharp, who was always on the lookout for likely disciples, was there on that occasion, and his encouragement spurred us on.
Yes, right, sir. Yes, I understand that. Now, tell us, how did the formation of the English Folk Dance Society, in fact, come about? And I'd also like to couple with that question something of when, in fact, did the first non-traditional men's Morris side appear?
Well, we, that is Helen and I,
Yes.
taught the dances to some friends, and we formed ourselves into a folk dance club.
Yes.
And at the beginning of 1911, we gave a public performance at which Cecil Sharp lectured, and Mattie Kay, that beautiful singer...
From Hambridge, of course, in Somerset. Yes, yes, yes.
No. She
No?
came from the north of
Oh,
England.
did she? But she sang the Seeds of Love at Hambridge, didn't she?
No.
Didn't she?
That was John England.
Good, great, yes.
Oh, yes,
She sang it in the evening at the
Yes,
class.
that's right. Yes, she sang it. Quite right.
All right, go on, my dear, go on. Sorry, I had to interrupt.
Well, I expect the dancing on that occasion was pretty crude. But anyhow, the performance was a great success, and it encouraged us to undertake further activities.
Yes.
We gave classes and other performances, all, of course, under Sharp's direction, and the club formed the nucleus of the EFDS, English Folk Dance Society,
Yes.
which, as you know, was inaugurated at a public meeting in December 1911.
Yes.
Shortly after its formation, the Society made its debut at a public performance of the Suffolk Street Galleries in London,
Yes.
and that was the first appearance of a non-traditional
Men's Morris side.
men's Morris side.
Yes, indeed. Well, now, a burning question of the present day is, of course, about women's Morris, which really is beginning to escalate. We're getting quite a number of women forming clubs of their own, and I've just been to Whitby Folk Festival, and I played for the daily Morris instruction for an hour and a half, and almost half the class were women. What have you to say about that?
Well, I'm very glad to hear it.
Right.
Yes, traditionally, of course, the Morris is a men's dance.
Yes.
But there's no earthly reason why it should not be performed by women. In fact, in the early days of the revival, Cecil Sharp depended very largely on women for demonstration and for teaching. Women at that time were more readily available than the men.
Yes.
But after all, let's be sensible about it.
Yes.
The dance is no longer tied to its traditional setting.
That's right, indeed.
For instance, its performance is not restricted to certain seasons of the year
No.
or to a select team.
No.
And that is as it should be, because the dance has a universal aesthetic appeal. Don't you agree?
Oh, indeed, I do. That's most apposite and very well worth listening to. Now, I'd like you, if you will, to say something about standards in the Morris dance, and particularly refer to the standards of, I think we might both call him our old friend, William Kimber.
Well, in the early days of the revival, under Cecil Sharp's guidance, the performance of the dance, both by men and by women, reached an extraordinarily high standard.
Yes.
And retained all its essential characteristics. I only wish that we had a film of that first men's Morris team. But alas, most of its members were killed in the First World War.
Yes, George Butterworth surely was one of them, wasn't he?
Oh, yes.
And Tiddy, Reginald Tiddy, was he?
Tiddy.
Tiddy.
And,
Yes,
they
yes.
were beautiful
Yes,
dances.
I wish I'd seen them. Yes. Sorry, I interrupted you.
But
go on.
I think it's so fortunate that Cecil Sharp's first contact with the traditional Morris was through William Kimber, whose dancing at that time was at the height of perfection, because Kimber gave him the clue to what other less proficient dancers were endeavouring to express.
Yes, indeed.
But above all, we must be thankful that Cecil Sharp had the instinct of the artist, and he was able to perceive the intention which lay behind the actual physical movements of the dancers,
Yes.
which so often were impaired by old age or infirmity,
Yes.
because generally speaking, the performance of the traditional dancers at that time, it was no longer in its prime.
Quite so. Well, it's so fortunate, of course, that Cecil Sharp came on the scene when he did, because otherwise we would have lost it all forever.
That's true.
Now, I'd like you to say something about your experience of first seeing the Bampton traditional side. When, in fact, did you first see it?
It was on Whit Monday in 1910,
Yes.
and Cecil Sharp escorted a party of us to Bampton. I remember Vaughan Williams was one of the party.
Oh, was he really?
Yes.
That's nice, yes.
But he warned us that before we went, that in many respects the dancing would be unlike what he'd been teaching us.
Yes.
Because in the style and the technique of the dance, He'd been guided by the older generation of dancers,
Yes.
and particularly by Charles Tanner, of whom it used to be said that a woman could place her fingers under his feet while he was dancing and not be injured. And during the course of the day, Charles Tanner danced a few steps for us, and we were able to get an insight into what the Bampton Morris must once have been.
Yes. Now, will you tell us what you feel was Cecil Sharp's ideal in essence?
Yes. Well, I feel that however awkward were the dancers that he saw and from whom he collected the dance, he was always able to sense the ideal that lay behind the movements.
Yes.
And it was that ideal that he endeavored to pass on to his followers. And I'd like to quote his own words.
Do, please.
I found myself charged with the responsibility of transmitting an elaborate form of artistic expression from one small class of the nation to the rest of the community. An art which, although surviving only amongst a small section of the community, belonged to and expressed the ideals and aspirations of the entire nation.
Yes.
Now, he didn't, of course, expect everyone to attain that ideal.
Right, sir.
He knew that there must be bad dancing, as everywhere there is bad art.
Yes.
But his aim was to establish a recognized standard to which all who wish could conform. And certainly he succeeded in achieving that aim.
Indeed, indeed. Well, now, be quite frank with me, my dear. What do you think about our standards? Do you think we're lowering our standards? And is there, in fact, any side, which in your opinion really does justice to the dance today?
Well, I wonder if nowadays we are not in danger of a lowering of standards and of losing sight of the ideal. In recent years, I can truly say that I have seen only one team that does justice to the dance, and that is the Headington Quarry side.
Yes.
They remain true to the tradition which they heritate from William Kimber, and they portray the Morris in its full glory. Now, I'm sure there must be other teams that have maintained a high standard.
There are indeed, yes.
But it's not been my good fortune to see them.
No.
Of course, with the ever-growing popularity of the dance, it's inevitable that there should be an increasing number of poor dancers.
Yes.
People who, in the words of Bernard Shaw, wax sticks and caper, but cannot dance.
Very well.
I came across that.
Brilliant. Where did you find it?
I came across it in a letter he wrote to Cecil Sharp.
Extremely, was it?
I think
Extremely
it's
good.
very
Extremely good, yes.
But in the circumstances, it's all the more important that the chosen few should not lose sight of the ideal.
How right you are. How right you are indeed. Well, now, why do you think, in fact, that standards have declined? I mean, you have said so, and I'd like you also to say something which is so important to the Morris Ring, not only the Morris Ring as we're seeing it now, but the Morris Ring in many years' time, and you or I have departed, about technique. Standards and technique, in brief.
Well, I think that one of the reasons for the decline in the standard of dancing is the fear of becoming too academic. Dancers feel that it's more satisfactory to get their dances direct from the traditional teams
Yes.
rather than from Cecil Sharp's printed instructions.
Yes.
But so often the result is a mere imitation of the dancers, the traditional dancers, physical movements in which the spirit of the dance is lost sight of. And I'd like to remind you of what Kimber once said to me. If it were my last words, I would say, stick to Cecil Sharp's books.
Yes.
You will keep traditionally right only by doing so. Of course, I'm not for a moment suggesting that there isn't much to be gained from studying the performance of traditional dances, even when their technique is imperfect.
Yes.
For instance, their intense concentration, their sense of purpose, and absence of showmanship are all things to be emulated.
Yes, indeed.
But, I repeat, a mere slavish imitation of their physical movements will not reveal the true spirit of the dance. Yes, I believe that many dancers nowadays are handicapped by their faulty technique. Now, technique is not something which can be added to the dance, a sort of finish or polish.
Right, sir.
It is the means whereby the dancer expresses the spirit of the dance. And technique and art are body and soul, and they are inseparable.
Yes.
Which is obvious.
Yes, but it's so true.
I think that the main fault lies in the actual Morris step. And I do feel that I can speak with authority about this, for I was taught by Cecil Sharp himself, and I have very vivid memories of William Kimber in his prime, and I've seen a few other good traditional dancers, the Howard brothers from Brackley, and William Pearman from Kirtlington.
Yes.
I remember so well in the very early days plodding through Jockey to the Fair,
Yeah.
when suddenly I had a vision of Kimber's performance of it. Well, immediately I was transported. I felt subconsciously that my movements were transformed. And that inward knowledge of the dance never left me. I only wish I could give you a visual
I
demonstration,
wish indeed you could.
but alas, it's 20 or 30 years or more, too late for that.
Yeah.
And all I could do is to give you a verbal
Now,
description.
please do that. It'll be most important.
Well, I think I can probably not do better than quote the description that I gave to Dr. Lionel Bacon,
Yes.
which he published in his excellent handbook of Morris dancing.
Yes.
Here it is. The change of foot, as well as the hop, is made with a slight spring. That is, the weight of the body is raised from the ground before each step, so that the change of foot takes place in the air. The dancer alights on the ball of the foot with the supporting leg held under the body,
Yes.
and at the same time the free leg is swung loosely forward from the hip, the lower leg hanging loosely from the knee. The free leg remains in this position until the next change of foot. It is then swung sharply back, and the foot takes the ground under the body.
Yes.
Well, if the step is thus executed, it will acquire a rhythm and sparkle and give buoyancy to the whole body.
Yes.
If, say, moving forward, the foot is allowed to take the ground ahead of the body,
Yes.
which so often happens,
Yes, indeed.
the dance will become lifeless and dead.
Yes.
A living example of what I've just described can be seen in the dancing of the Headington Quarry Morris side.
Thank you, my dear. And of course, what I'd now like to know is whether you feel that the present Headington Quarry Morris side, of which I have the honour, as you know, to be a member, which is one of my great joys, you praised it very highly, but does it fail in any way, do you think?
Well, I should say that where the team fails is in the arm movements. And actually, I have mentioned this to them.
That's good, that's good.
It's, they stiffen their shoulders and perform rather jerky movements
Yes.
of the arms
Yes.
instead of a free rhythmical swing. And above all, one misses that lovely sweeping overhead circular movement which can be discerned in the photographs of William Kimber.
Indeed. It's so curious, of course, that now they bunch their handkerchiefs, and in the pictures of William Kimber, of course, his handkerchiefs are not bunched at all.
Well,
They were held in one corner.
as far as I remember, it was only in country gardens that he bunched them.
Ah, I see. Well, now they bunch them for everything. It's most extraordinary. Anyway, we must press on. Now I'd like you to tell us, please, something about the need for practicing and tuition.
Well, there's no need for me to tell you, but Morris dancing is an art, and that, like all arts, it needs practicing. And I venture to think that it would do no harm if, as in the old days, there were more tuition. Of course, I sympathize with those who fear that this might make the dancing too uniform, but this need not happen, provided that the dance is approached with understanding and reverence. Now, I hope that these remarks I've made on Morris dancing in the present day will not appear too derogatory.
Yeah, I'm sure they won't appear derogatory at all. It's why we have you here, because you're an expert and you can tell us the truth. And to follow on with that, I gather you are pleased that there are so many Morris sides flourishing today. And I can really personally assure you, my dear, that very many of those sides are very, very good. The quality of one particular side dancing at Whitby, I thought, was quite superb.
Yes, you're right. It does gladden me that there are so many active teams. And it's wonderful to think that there's now no danger that the dance may become extinct, as there was before Cecil Sharp started his great work. But I think that many dancers are not making the most of their heritage. They haven't discovered that the Morris, to quote Cecil Sharp's words, is an objective expression of the mystical and spiritual imaginings of man's inner nature.
I think it's a wonderful phrase, really wonderful, most apt. So right. Now, let us switch for a moment to the other forms of traditional dance. I'd like you to tell us something of your thoughts about sword dancing today. Now, this is something, of course, particularly and peculiarly dear to the heart of the northern dancers. There are some lovely dancers around in sword, but I would like to hear your views about sword dancing today.
Well, I feel much happier about the sword dance. It seems to me that it has remained truer to the tradition than has the Morris. And I believe that this is, in part at any rate, due to the competitions that used to take place at Many years I used to adjudicate the first folk dance competitions there, and I saw some most beautiful dancing. Well, personally, I'm very sorry, but competitions have gone out of fashion. They were good fun, and certainly they helped to give people an idea of what we were aiming at.
Yes, I'm sure you're right. There's much to be said for them. There are some things to be said against them, but that's for another time. What I'd like you now to do, Maud, my dear, is to tell us something of the country dance, particularly with regard to Playford dancing.
Well, I think it's a very great pity that the dances from Playford's dancing master, with their lovely tunes, are so seldom performed.
I do entirely agree with you.
Cecil Sharp has often been criticised for including these in the folk dance repertory because it's argued they are not pure folk. Well, it's true, they were danced at court and in high society, but we have to remember that the country dance was not the exclusive possession of any one class of society.
Right.
And Cecil Sharp firmly believed that the dances were rooted in tradition, though he accepted the fact that some of them, particularly those in the later editions, had been somewhat furbished up by the dancing masters.
Yes.
Anyhow, by ignoring these dances, we are robbing ourselves of a very lovely and satisfying form of recreation, not to say recreation. I should mention that in the interpretation of the dances, Cecil Sharp was, as far as the style was concerned, guided by the performance of the traditional country dances that he had himself seen.
Yes. I'm glad you said what you have about Playford, because I still, as you well know, wholeheartedly agree with you. This neglect of Playford is something we should be very sorry about indeed. Let's hope there may be a change for the better one of these days. Now, is there anything else you would wish to say before we end this rather official sort of interview?
Well, I'm afraid that, generally speaking, we have departed rather far from the style of dancing.
Yes.
As it was performed in Cecil Sharp's lifetime. But there are exceptions, and I was immensely cheered when a few weeks ago, at a reception given by the American ambassador, I saw an excellent performance given by the country dancers from Berea College in Kentucky. And it made me feel quite nostalgic. Actually, I have an idea that the traditional style has been better maintained in America than here in England.
You're quite right, my dear. I saw it only at the last ring meeting when an American traditional side, which was nameless, performed Headington Quarry. It was like going right back into history. Marvellous. They did it from the book, you see. Now, you must finish off, mustn't you? You say, I think, that you've talked long enough.
Oh, yes, I certainly do. I think I've talked long enough.
I don't believe it.
I feel rather as though I've been preaching a sermon.
Very good for me, my dear. Does me a world of good.
Well, I'm afraid it's all been rather sketchy. But I would suggest to those who've not already done so that they should read Cecil Sharp's biography, which is called Cecil Sharp, His Life and Work. And I certainly do think that every club should possess a copy.
Yeah.
I was rereading it myself the other day, and at this distance of time, the magnitude of what Cecil Sharp achieved in a comparatively short space of time seemed almost unbelievable. Well, in conclusion, I'd like to send a message to the members of the Morris Ring to say how much I appreciate and how much I know that Cecil Sharp would have appreciated the great work they are doing in perpetuating our magnificent English folk dance tradition.
Well, I'm particularly glad that you mentioned your own work, the wonderful work on Cecil Sharp, which I feel is I entirely agree with you ought to be much more frequently read. And I still treasure a letter you sent me after I had the honor of reviewing that book in the journal. You said that I really got to the heart of the matter, and I said, I think, to find beauty in ordinary people and things.
Yes.
And you said that was his great genius.
Yes.
And it was very satisfying to hear that from you and to have it from you. I shall always treasure that. I hope many will be persuaded to read the book as a result of what you've said. And I must now end by saying how much we are indebted to you, my dear, for giving up your time to us. It is most important. You've given us words of wisdom and experience. You're a living link with Cecil Sharp. I suppose really, as I said before, the only really living link, and as the whole of this interview will be of profound importance, not only at today's Morris Ring, but in future history of the Morris Ring when you and I have departed from the scene. And I do, on behalf of the Morris Ring, thank you most sincerely for giving up so much of your time.
Well, I'd just like to say in response to that it has been really not only a great pleasure but a great honor for me to have made this recording, and I'd like to thank you, Kenneth, and all the others who've taken so much trouble and made this possible.
Thank you, my dear.